Welcome back to a live reading of The Effigy of Love, as written by Tony Sjöblom and read by Juho Hankela. This is Chapter 19, Grey Dread. The ice-cold water splashing over Endrik's face made him convulse and cough as his eyes finally opened. Each cough felt like a nail being hammered into his skull, and the darkness around him felt thin and restrictive like a spider's web, affording him none of the consolation it usually did. Groaning and cringing, he slowly pushed himself up and reclined against the cold stone wall. The thud of a pail being set down echoed around him. The faint light of a candle on a table swayed as a shadow passed before it. Hello? Endrik said, voice but a whisper that barely escaped his dry throat. He was afforded no reply, save for the creaking leather as the shadow paced slowly in front of him. He had no idea who it was. Velp? Mallowan? It might have been the devil himself in disguise. Endrik was about to speak again, but stopped before he could utter even a single syllable, noticing that even opening his mouth made his head throb with pain. He lifted a shaky hand and gently touched the side of his head, cold fingers connecting with a warm, soft bump, a sore reminder taking him back to what had happened at the pond. Reality charged at him like a hunting dog rushing through the morning mist in spring, and he felt himself grow impossibly cold within. It hadn't been a nightmare after all, judging by the horrendous state he was in. But how much of it had been real? His haven destroyed, his love gone, his life grey. Every memory that slowly settled in place felt too cruel to believe. Being snatched from her arms, the burning of the glade, the hellhole he was in right now. You know, a hushed voice, familiar in sound, did its cadence throwing Endrik off completely, echoed in the dark chamber but ultimately never finished the sentence. The shadow took a deep breath, then sighed and turned its back to him. Endrik could hear the sound of creaking leather again as the shadow clenched and unclenched its fist. He wanted to speak, to plea, but the taste of blood soured his dry mouth and made him feel sick. He was thirsty beyond thirsty, and the growling hunger echoed between the dark stone walls. The instant his stomach made the sound, the shadow turned around. Fearing something painful was about to unfold, Endrik tensed up and braced himself. The clenched jaw sent spiking pain running all over his head, making him wince. The shadow didn't hurt him, though. No. Instead it knelt before him, the light revealing a shorn scalp on thick shoulders, and said, "I could get you." "My lord," an unfamiliar man's muffled voice sounded from behind the door, silencing the shadow. "Open." Mallowan's voice seeped in through the cracks in the door frame like distant thunder. As the key clattered in the lock, Endrik felt the shadow's demeanor and posture change completely as it shot to its feet. The door swung open and the warm light of the torches outside burned Endrik's eyes. As he raised his hand to shield his eyes, the light was shadowed by someone in the doorway. Someone he had hoped to never meet again. An oncoming storm of thunder carrying a biased jury, the judge's hammer, the executioner's wrath. "Leave." Mallowan's voice was like sharp steel in winter as he took slow, deliberate steps into the cell. "Yes, my lord," Velf murmured and headed for the door. Endrik felt a sickening feeling churning in his guts. Whether it was pure hatred or fear he did not know. As the heavy door closed, leaving behind but silence and a strangling darkness, he couldn't believe he had been thrown into a dungeon. Him, a noble. Public punishment came with its own share of drawbacks like humiliation, but this? Endrik couldn't even begin to fathom what was in store for him. He had never been to the dungeons himself and had always hoped he would never have to go there, even as a visitor. Thus, he had no idea what happened in the underbelly of the grey castle. The whole place had always seemed to him like the greyest of the grey, a place where no light could ever shine, no matter who brought it, for no one that entered ever came out. His head throbbed as his heart pounded in his chest, wanting nothing more than to leap out of him and beat its way out of the dark. But there was no way out. No, there was one way out, and that was through the hellish beast that stood in front of him. "My lord." Hendrik stammered, struggling to keep the nervousness from his voice. Am I not your father anymore? Mallowan replied with feigned worry as he sat down by the wooden table. Father. Hendrik swiftly corrected himself, feeling the need to soften whatever punishment was coming. He carefully watched the dim lights of the candle dance on the right side of Mallowan's face, making him seem like half a man, half demon. His brown eyes looked like pieces of coals that stuck in his lean face, glistening with that content fire that could burn Hendrik and everything he loved to ash at any moment. Shut it! Mallowan hit his fist on the table, making something heavy and metallic clatter on the table, nearly extinguishing the candle. This. The coals were now burning like hot, red embers as he said matter-of-factly, is a place of silent contemplation. Here I talk and you listen. Only when I demand it shall you talk. These rules should be abundantly clear by now, as they are much the same as in the court. Alas, he looked down at his hands and continued as if talking to himself. Have I not been a great teacher? Your recent actions make me think that you've not yet learned our ways and customs thoroughly. Could it be that I have failed? No. Hendrik's reply was a whimper and just slipped out of him. Have I asked for you to speak? Mallowan said with feigned confusion and stared at his prisoner with his needle-sharp gaze. Hendrik shook his head and stared at the dark floor. Fear and panic crashed through his veins, draining him of all colors. This dungeon with this demon was the last place he wanted to be. He needed to leave this place, to find her, before the grave would collapse onto him and bury him beneath it. But how? The pain in his head throbbed worse with each dark thought, and they were plenty. The castle was supposed to be but a horrible memory of the past, a memory he had already snuffed out underneath the heel of his boot. He had already swam in a sea of colors, mingled, then mixed with joy and love, had the last remnants of the grey within him dissolved and wiped away by her soft touch. Settled in his new home, and taken the residents of paradise into his heart, where they belonged. This nightmare was not where he was supposed to be, not anymore, nor should he ever have been. Please, God, let me wake up and end this nightmare. I learned a new word today. Dread. Mallowan's voice made Hendrik's skin crawl as he broke the bubble of nightmarish reverie. My journal, Hendrik was interrupted by his father's backhand, connecting with his cheek like lightning from the sky. I talk, Mallowan said matter-of-factly, and took 2 slow steps backward and sat down again. He picked up Hendrik's journal and continued browsing. Myrtle told me it wasn't a nice word to describe things, that I should learn to love and cherish what I have. I think she is wrong. I think it is the perfect word. I dread this place. I dread the captain. I dread my father. I dread my mother. I dread. Mallowan stopped reading and smiled, then looked at Hendrik. Now who told you that word? I wonder. And when? You should always start your entries with the date. Hendrik clenched his jaw tight, no matter how much the pain spiked his temple. Watching Mallowan run his fingers over his journal, the only thing other than the glade he had kept secret through all his life, made something vicious flare inside of him. Myrtle had kept them safe somewhere. She had promised she wouldn't betray his trust. So how had Mallowan found them? Remember this one, Mallowan said, and licked his lips. Myrtle tells me that hate and love walk hand in hand, or that it is like a coin, that you can't have hate without love. I don't understand what she means, but I don't want to hate this place. I don't want feelings for this place. It only makes me feel bad. This place makes me feel bad, and I don't want to feel bad. Myrtle says, Life comes with both good and bad, but why can't there be only good? Hendrik swallowed against his dry throat, pushing the foul taste of iron down to his growling stomach. The taste didn't bother him any longer. In fact, it was good that he tasted the blood. It made him vigilant and more enduring. It unlocked something primal. It fed the inferno. The taste of dread, he thought to himself, as a vile smile covered his face. The irony of the situation was the only comfort right now, as he mentally readied himself for the punishment that was about to be unleashed upon him. He had no regrets at this point. It didn't even bother him that his father had found his old journal. Probably all of them. In fact, it was almost good that they had been found, because now everyone knew why Hendrik had tried to escape, as well as how he had really felt about living at Brightford all these years. Yes, Mallowan knew his innermost secrets, all the things Hendrik had never told anyone. He knew all the thoughts that had formed his boy into the being he was, and deep inside, Hendrik hoped it all pained his father to see how utterly he had failed at raising a son and heir into a grey beast of cruelty. I guess Myrtle hid more secrets than I even realized, Mallowan mused as he closed the journal. Alas, she is gone, as are the secrets. Maybe I shouldn't be so rash next time. Although I did take my time with her before handing her over to filth. The comment washed all of Hendrik's smug resolve away. Had his stomach not been but a void, he would have vomited then and there. Mallowan's remarks tearing open the healing scars as they transported him back to that awful rainy day. Oh, how Hendrik hated how his father always knew what to say to instill the most dread. Then again, the whole man contained nothing but dread and hatred. Noticing the boy was suffering internally, Mallowan slowly rose to his feet and started pacing in front of him. As for your little stunt, he said, hand steepled in front of his lips, eyes distant, fixated on some cruel plan only he could see. The pacing and contemplation was only for show. Hendrik knew as much. His father was rash and impatient by nature. Thus Hendrik took this brief moment of respite to calm and ready himself. He had felt a lot of pain in his lifetime already, both physical and mental, and nothing could get any worse than it already had. In truth, while sitting there, reclining against the damp, cold stone wall, watching the devil pace in front of him, Hendrik wished for this all to be over with so he could take his next step toward his ultimate escape. Closing his eyes and taking a deep breath, Hendrik felt the golden bands around his heart tighten. They shone bright in the darkness inside of him, vanquishing all the feelings of doubt and fear. The thought of her made him forget about the dread that surrounded him, made him invincible. I'll return to you soon, my love. And next time, nothing can or will go wrong.